All right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches, to this week's get-together. Coach Bo here with you. I got a good introduction message to increase our motivation, our consistency, especially on those days where we just don't have the energy or we're feeling down, we're not feeling well, we're frustrated, we're getting irritated as a coach. I have a message that can help us push through these challenges, these mental challenges that we come up against, not just as coaches, but as parents. The next segment of the podcast today will be two different coaches, the Eagles head coach, Nick Sirianni, and the Chiefs head coach, Andy Reid. And I'll share a quick clip from each of them. We'll break it down and see how we can use their message to elevate our coaching game. Good coaching at the fundamental level, at the foundational level, is good no matter what sport it is, no matter what level it's at. And then I'm going to share with you an Albert Pujols hitting video that he shares out a message that I think is something we should definitely share with our hitters. And I'll talk about why hitters like Albert Pujols, not just because he's a Hall of Famer, but hitters like Pujols, why they check a few more boxes than even those hitters like Tony Gwynn, Pete Rose, and Wade Boggs. All right, real quick, I want to touch on something that I was thinking about the other day, listening to a friend of mine who played pro ball, college ball, of course, high school baseball, and we were talking about the good things that the coaches that we played for did, and then we discussed some of the things that we would do better, things we don't do with our players because we learned from them both ways. We took what they did really well, and we also looked at the things that they did but were not the reason they were successful, and if anything might have hindered some of that success potential. Now, why am I sharing this with all of you? Be very careful when you're vetting. Be very cautious when you are listening to coaches, to baseball people, to coaches of any level, or in any profession. If they consistently use statements such as, my high school coach did this, and we do this because we did this in high school, or we do it this way because that's how we did it at my college. Hey, this is what we did in pro ball. Or they use everything that one of their coaches used when they played for them. When we hear this message, it doesn't invalidate what they're saying or what they're going to say next, but it is somewhat of a red flag, in my opinion, because they are inherently speaking anecdotally. Now, that doesn't mean what they're saying is incorrect or not true or not the best way to do it or not a great way to do it. What I'm saying is, I think it's important when we hear people speak about things that, of course, one, they should have been in the trenches for quite a while doing it, but their reasoning for using a drill or using a strategy or for having a set of rules or for running their offense a certain way or their defense a certain way or having their pitchers pitch a certain way, if the only reason they give is that their old high school coach did that or their college coach did that or they had a pro coach that did that or the organization they played for professionally did that, to me that's a red flag. There should be more to it than that. They should be able to explain the reasoning, and we'll talk about this a little bit more at the beginning of next week's podcast. What I'm trying to do here is not just give you all fish. I believe you're all super intelligent people that can be taught how to fish, i.e. coach, at an efficient rate. And I think one of the best ways to speed up the coaching learning curve, at least from my part, is to share with you a paradigm in which, a mindset in which you can go out and pick up these things on your own, that you can assess these things without having to go and do a bunch of fact checking on it. And the last thing I'll say about this introductory message here for this episode is ask yourself, for those of you that have listened to the over 270 episodes, the 5 years plus that we've done here on the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, how many times have I said, this is the way I think we should do it, or this is probably the best way to do it, or this is a great way to do it because my high school coach did it this way, my high school program did it this way, my college coach did it this way, my college program did it this way, the professional organization I played for did it this way. You could count on one hand how many times I've brought up a tip and said, I recommend this because, or this is the best way because, or simply this is the way because my fill in the blank coach did it this way. And by the way, my high school coach is a Hall of Fame coach, one of the winningest coaches in California state history. He won a national title and numerous times finished in the top 10 in the nation. Tons of professional players, a good amount of major league players came from his program. 40 plus years as a coach. My college coach coach, a Hall of Fame coach, one of the most respected college coaches of the last 30, 40 years. The Cleveland Indians / Guardians, when I played in their organization, it was a well-respected organization run by people that have gone on to some big-time jobs in the professional baseball world at the major league level. But I don't come on here and bring that up very much. I think this is very important when we're listening to somebody explain it or teach it. They should understand it inside and out. They should understand the pros and cons of their strategy, their tips, their drills, their approach to coaching. Not just, this is how Coach so-and-so did it. And he went to the College World Series every other year. And he's a Hall of Fame coach. All right, so keep that in mind when you are listening to information out there. And that goes for anything, right? Do they understand first principles? Do they understand the reasoning behind what makes something a good strategy? And they have many examples of it being used. It's something that's common amongst many great coaches, not just the one they played for back in the day. All right, when we get out to the baseball field, we may have had a long day at work. Very likely we're a little bit tired. Then our players start acting a fool, start goofing off because they're kids, and that's what they do. That's what they're wired to do. And couple that with maybe not getting good sleep the last couple nights. Now, all that can be it's very easy to get irritated, frustrated, upset, and not enjoy coaching from time, and find ourselves from time to time not enjoying the role of being a coach. First off, being a coach is one of the greatest things you can do in your life. It's part of your life, no doubt about that. But I want to help curb some of this irritation, frustration that we get. And I'm going to help this is more of a paradigm shift. And this is a quick message to help us push through these situations with energy, with a positive mindset, with optimism, with a sense of positivity. Here it is. We've talked about the stat that approximately 75% of our time that we ever get to spend with our kids is over by the time they turn 12. And 90% of the time with our kids is over by the time they're 18. Now, speaking specifically as a dad or even a mom, when you're out there, by staying positive, by not blowing up, by not blowing a gasket, by staying calm, focused on coaching the right priorities, not getting caught up in focusing just on winning at all costs, not getting frustrated by a bad call by the umpire and screaming and yelling and making a scene, or worse, some of the stuff we see nowadays. By keeping our coaching priorities aligned and a sense of thankfulness, being out there on the baseball field in the sunshine, coaching the game of baseball, keep in mind that the better job we do as a parent and the better job we do as a coach will almost guarantee we are going to increase the amount of time that our kids want to spend with us when they become adults. So we talk about getting kids better as adults. We talk about using baseball, in our case, as a vehicle to get our kids better prepared for life, to become better adults through this fun game called baseball. But from our side, as parents and coaches, by making sure we go in there with the right mindset, by making sure we keep the right mindset, by making sure we keep the right priorities, we will in all likelihood increase the amount of time we get to spend with our kids once they're adults. The law of reciprocity. And not only that, when players see you down the road, players that you coached, the size of their smile, their willingness to stop and talk, their willingness to share with you how they're doing in life is in all likelihood going to be much higher, much greater. So keep that in mind when you get irritated and you don't want to be out there. The more we give back to our kids, our players, the more we will likely get back later in life. Now, you can say, Coach Bo, that's kind of a selfish way to look at it. No, it's a win-win. They win and we can win. And sometimes we need all the motivation we can get when those kids are acting a fool, or we're really tired and don't really feel like going out there, or when the next season comes up and we're like, I don't want to coach a third year. I don't want to coach a fourth year. Just remember, those numbers that I mentioned earlier, the percentage of time that we get to spend with our kids after they're 12, after they're 18, it drops off a lot. But remember, it's a percentage, not a total. So let's make that 10% that we get to spend with our kids after they're 18. Let's make that 10% much bigger. Let's make that a big 10%. When our kids become teenagers, we've already spent 75% of the time with them that we get to spend with them. Let's make that 25% a big number by going out there and doing our best as coaches, even on days we don't feel like it, especially on days we don't feel like being a great coach or even coaching at all. Let's remember, if we make the most of that 75% before they turn 12, that 25% on the back end is going to be a big amount of time, a large amount of time. And we'll be thankful for that for the rest of our life. So sometimes as coaches, we just need some motivation, not just X's and O's, but that motivation, something to put a little spring in our step, a little bounce in our step. because coaching's not always that easy. Sometimes motivation is hard to come by. I think this is a mindset that can really motivate us to be consistently good coaches for our kids. All right, speaking of good coaches, the Eagles, of course, won the Super Bowl. And Nick Sirianni, their head coach, he has a winning percentage of 71%. And here's a great clip of Coach Sirianni saying something that we definitely need to consider. And I think all the good coaches do this, at least all the great coaches do this to some extent. And I think something we should definitely consider. And this message ties in with a conversation that I had with my old man and my wife during the Super Bowl. And we were talking, watching the game. And I said, you know what I really like about this Eagles coach, Coach Sirianni? I really like how he doesn't seem to care how he looks when it comes to doing the tush-push, when it comes to running the ball a little more, when it comes to having a quarterback like Jalen Hurts. A little different than the prototypical quarterback. Jalen Hurts, he was overlooked a little bit in the draft. So I was sharing that thought with my old man and my wife during the Super Bowl that I really like how he doesn't care what other coaches or other people think. He's not trying to look cute. He doesn't want his team to look all cute. He doesn't care if his offense is all razzle-dazzle. He wants to win. And I've mentioned this before about a lot of offensive coordinators and baseball coaches who have these wild offenses that are all about kind of look at me as a coach, look what I can design, rather than just what flat-out wins games. The greatest high school football program in the history of the United States is De La Salle. I think there's probably some other programs that could argue against that, but it's fairly well known that De La Salle from Northern California is considered the greatest high school football program, at least of the last 50 years. I watched them play in person, and I've watched them play on TV many a times. I've read a couple of the books written about their program and their head coach. They don't care about style at all. I watched them firsthand from the 50-yard line, play the first ever high school football game, number 1 versus number 2 in the country, at least as far as the rankings go, when they played Long Beach Poly at Veterans Stadium. And it was the most boring offense you could ever imagine for those people that like razzle-dazzle, as the phrase goes, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. There wasn't dust this night. It was a little bit soggy on the field. It was 4 yards and a splash of mud. And they just went 4 yards, 4 yards, 6 yards, 4 yards, 7 yards, 12 yards, 2 yards, 5 yards, 8 yards. And they beat Long Beach Poly. They probably ran a total of 9 different plays. And I see these teams on TV running, or these offensive coordinators trying to call up a different play every single play. Like, they got to look cool because they got 70 different plays on their play sheet. It's a fool's errand. So listen to what Coach Sirianni says here. And this is something when we go out to the field, if you want to be great, and definitely if you want to be a good coach, you got to be willing to be different. And you can't care what other coaches think about your practice or how you coach. Because if you do, you're going to fall into that trap. And that trap is not looking good for youth sports these days, and definitely not youth baseball. So let's take a listen to what Coach Sirianni says here.
Great performance by everybody. Offense, defense, special teams, how we getting us the guys, our coaching staff, these great players. We didn't really ever care what anyone thought about how we won or their opinions. All we want to do is win.
We didn't care about what other people thought and their opinions. All we wanted to do was win. So if it means doing the tush push or the brotherly shove, it didn't matter. We're having Jalen Hurts back there. I love Jalen Hurts. I liked him since the beginning of his Alabama career. I really like him as a person. He's a great young man. So Coach Sirianni is the winningest coach over the last 4 seasons in the NFL, and he doesn't care what other people think. So if you're designing a practice to look cool while other coaches watch, or you care what they think about your drill, or you care about what they think about your infield-outfield routine, or your throwing routine, it's a fool's errand, and you're leaving a lot of success on the table. Another great coach, Andy Reid, he's won 74% of his games in the NFL over the last 10 years. That's nuts. The league is designed for everybody to go 500. The entire mission of the NFL in terms of their parity rules is for everybody to go 500. Now, you could say what you want about what the refs call and don't call for certain teams. I'm not going to get into that right now. But he's won just under 75% of his games over the last 10 years. He's nearly 3 times the age of some of his players. And I want you to hear this message thinking about this. Here's a coach whose success and leadership directly impacts the livelihood of hundreds of people, not just his players, but the whole organization. So his success means their success. Many of those people are in their early 20s. Some of these kids come from really bad neighborhoods. This is their out. This is their way to get out. So he has a lot riding on his success. He's leading an organization, team that's got people that are trying to earn a living, paying their bills. This isn't youth baseball. He's coaching people whose livelihood is tied to his success. Listen to this message right here.
I'm coming at you every day with good positive energy, and I'm going to teach. And if I'm not doing it, if I'm not maxing out every day, you let me know.
So if he can go out there with that mindset, we can surely go out to the youth baseball field or any baseball field with this mindset, coming out with good, positive energy every day. I love me some Andy Reid. All right, now I know those are some football coaches, but I was trying to tie it into the recent Super Bowl, and great coaching is great coaching. Now let's specifically talk baseball and hitting. Here's an Albert Pujols clip that I came across, posted by Baseball IQ on Twitter. Is at baseballq_APP. It's a really good follow on Twitter. Here's the clip. Albert Pujols talking hitting.
The most important thing that we forget about is you need to see the ball. Really, when you're on these batter's balls, you can't be thinking about hands, leg. You need to focus on the most important thing. You need to see the ball, and hit it.
Albert Pujols says you can't be in the batter's box thinking about hands and legs. You got to see the ball and hit it. This goes back to why I preach the plan A, plan 2/plan B approach and the emphasis on teaching that. Too much coaching when it comes to hitters is coaching the swing, when we should flip that in most cases and be coaching up, getting our players to see the ball well, to know what to swing at and what not to swing at, and consistently do that correctly. And also, you could throw in be on time. So if you're on time, you're going to see the ball better. Now, Albert Pujols, I put in a little bit higher category than even Tony Gwynn, Pete Rose, Rod Carew, some of these great hitters that had really high batting averages, because I think the hitters like Ted Williams, Barry Bonds, Albert Pujols, I put them in a higher category than the other hitters because they could hit for average and they could hit for power. They could do both. They also walked a lot. So they did the trifecta. They were excellent at pitch selection. They had a higher batting average, a very high batting average, like some of those years Pujols had, and of course Ted Williams, but they also drove the ball, right? So they're hitting the ball hard, hitting hard line drives, thinking doubles, not just put it in play, which produces more runs when successful. But along with that, they also swung at the right pitches, so they struck out fewer times per at-bat when compared to other hitters that produced a high amount of doubles, home runs, etc. So they walked a lot, they made contact a lot, and they hit for power a lot. It's like in pitching. There's a lot of pitchers who have a lot of strikeouts, and there are pitchers that have very few walks. I believe the best pitchers are those that have the highest strikeout to walk ratio. They walk 25 hitters for the year, but they only strike out 60. But then you got a pitcher like Kurt Schilling who strikes out 250 and walks 25 hitters. Well, they both walk the same amount of hitters, but one is a much better pitcher because when you strike out a hitter, and I'm not saying we should go out and try to strike all hitters out, but the facts are that if you strike out hitters more often, that means fewer chances for them to get a hit. The trade-off has always been, are you going to walk more hitters because you're trying to throw it too hard or strike everybody out and then you walk everybody? If you can strike out more hitters and walk a low percentage of hitters, that to me puts you at a whole nother level than just the high strikeout pitchers that have a lot of walks or the low walk pitchers that also have very few strikeouts. So I kind of take that same mindset when it comes to assessing hitters. Do they have a high batting average? Great. Does that mean they're equal if they both batted .330? Heck no. Albert Pujols batting .330 drove in a heck of a lot more runs than Tony Gwynn batting .330 and scored just as many or more and probably walked just as many. So there's no knock on Tony and those great hitters. They're all great. You'll take those hitters all day. They're some of the all-time greats. But I'm saying there's another echelon of hitter. All right, next week, I'm going to share a tip behind what makes the 80-20 principle so successful for youth baseball coaches and following the 80-20 principle out there as a coach. And one of the underlying reasons that it helps us be much better coaches much faster, and that's the goal, right? To be good coaches, to be great coaches, but to do it efficiently. Not take 30 years to get there. Most of us aren't going to coach 30 years, much less 10. All right, that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you wouldn't mind leaving a quick review, supporting this podcast by leaving a review, that really helps the podcast and is much appreciated. And also sharing it with a friend, a family member, a coaching colleague. Those are the two best ways to help support this podcast. Appreciate y'all. Thank you for being a coach. You should be proud of yourself for being a coach. And we'll talk more coaching next week. Until then, let's take care of ourselves, our health, so we can be at our best for our families, our close friends, and let's take this information out there so we can be great coaches. And like any good two-strike hitting approach, let's put this stuff into play. All right, y'all, take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.